At 6:30 on the morning of December 7, 1941, cooks aboard the USS Arizona fired up the galley stoves for what every sailor called the best meal of the week, Sunday breakfast. Within 2 hours, more than 1,100 of those men would be dead, most with the taste of coffee still on their tongues. Number 17 on this list had a nickname that followed sailors into civilian life for the next 50 years. Number 6 was rationed within weeks of the attack, vanishing from mess halls for the rest of the war. And number 3, Navy Cook 040 prepared over 4,000 pounds of it every Saturday night, just to feed the fleet. 045. These were the last ordinary bites of bread and bacon thousands of young Americans would ever take. Before we start, hit that subscribe button. Let's count down the 25 foods Pearl Harbor sailors ate the morning the bombs fell. Number 25. SOS. Every sailor in the United States Navy knew those 3 letters, and it had nothing to do with distress signals. Creamed chipped beef on toast, served on thick slices of white bread with a ladle of peppered cream gravy studded with 120 to salty dried beef, was the most polarizing dish in the fleet. Some men loved it, 129 others cursed it. But on the morning of December 7th, the cooks aboard the West Virginia and the Oklahoma had already ladled gallons of the stuff across the serving lines. The recipe was simple: butter and flour cooked into a roux, whole milk whisked in, dried beef chipped fine, and black pepper cracked generously. It cost the Navy about 3 cents per serving. Sailors spooned it over toast, added a fried egg if they were lucky, and washed it down with coffee. SOS was fuel. Dense, hot, filling enough to carry a man through a 4-hour watch. Most Americans have forgotten it ever existed. Number 24. Navy coffee. The coffee aboard a 1941 battleship was unlike anything you would drink ashore. It was brewed in 30-gallon urns, boiled rather than dripped, and served black, or with a splash of candy-evaporated milk. It was strong enough to strip paint off a bulkhead. Sailors called it Joe. Some historians trace the nickname to Secretary of the Navy Josephus Daniels, who banned alcohol from ships in 1914, making coffee the only stimulant aboard. A single cook on the Arizona would prepare close to 60 gallons before reveille on a Sunday morning. Men drank it from heavy white ceramic mugs, 4 or 5 cups each. The beans came in massive burlap sacks stamped with the Navy anchor roasted dark to survive months at sea. On December 7, 1941, those urns were still steaming when the first torpedoes hit the water. Half the mugs on the mess decks never reached anyone's lips. Number 23. Scrambled eggs. The cooks aboard the destroyers and cruisers had fresh eggs that morning delivered from Oahu farms just 2 days earlier. On the larger battleships, galleys used close to 4,000 eggs for a single Sunday breakfast. They cracked a dozen at a time into massive mixing bowls, whisked them with a little canned milk and salt, then poured the mixture onto flat-top griddles, greased with bacon fat. Navy cooks learned early to scramble low and slow, folding the eggs with long wooden paddles so they stayed soft and custardy. Powdered eggs, called the Yellow Plague, and later to dominate the rest of the war, had not yet arrived in quantity. December 7th was one of the last great fresh egg breakfasts of the conflict. By Christmas, many of those sailors would never taste a real scrambled egg again. They would eat the reconstituted version, gray and rubbery. And remember number 22, bacon. American bacon in 1941 came in thick slabs from Iowa and Ohio, shipped to Pearl Harbor in wooden crates lined with wax paper. The Navy bought it by the ton. And on Sunday mornings, the smell of frying bacon was how most sailors woke up. Galley crews laid strips across sheet pans and baked them in massive ovens rather than frying on stovetops. This kept the bacon flat and crisp and let them cook hundreds of pieces at once. Each man got 3 or 4 slices crispaged and dripping. The fat was saved in 5-gallon cans called grease pots, and it was reused for cooking eggs and potatoes later in the week. A pound cost the Navy about 12 cents wholesale. That Sunday morning, cooks aboard the Arizona rendered nearly 200 before 6 o'clock a.m. The grease pots were still warm when the first bombs fell at 7:48 a.m. Number 21. Flapjacks, Navy. Pancakes were serious business. Cooks mixed them in 30-gallon crocks the night before using a sourdough starter carried from ship to ship, sometimes for years. Flapjacks hit the griddle at about 6 in across and 8 in thick. A striker cook, the youngest man in the galley, would stand at a flat top for 2 solid hours, flipping them with a wide metal spatula, stacked for high on a tin plate, drowned in imitation maple syrup with a pat of butter melting across the top. They were the breakfast of choice for men who had been on watch all night. Each sailor could eat 6 or 7 without blinking. The whaley aboard the Nevada reportedly went through 120 pounds of pancake batter that Sunday morning. The men who survived would remember the taste of maple and smoke for the rest of their lives. Number 20. Link sausage. Pork lynx fat and glistening hissed on the griddle alongside the bacon. The Navy contracted with Midwestern packers who shipped the sausages in frozen blocks wrapped in butcher paper. Cooks thawed them overnight in walk-in ice boxes, then pan-fried them in their own fat until the skins cracked. The smell was impossible to ignore. Sailors would line up before the doors to the mess even opened, noses twitching, stomachs growling. Each man got to lynx, sometimes 3 if the cook liked him. The grease that ran off was saved and mixed into the next batch of cornbread batter, giving the bread a deep, savory richness. Link sausage was considered a Sunday-only treat because the fresh pork did not travel well in the tropics. After December 7th, pork rations would shift almost entirely to canned Spam and bacon, and fresh lynx vanished from Pacific Fleet galleys for years. Number 19. Hash brown potatoes. Navy cooks called them grease spuds. The night cook would boil 100 pounds of russet potatoes in their skins, let them cool, then peel and shred them just before sunrise. The shredded potatoes hit the flat top in huge pancake-sized mounds, pressed down with a heavy iron spatula, and fried in reused bacon fat until the bottom turned dark gold. They were flipped once, fried again, then cut into squares with the edge of the spatula and served with a shake of salt and pepper. A portion was about the size of a paperback book. The crunchy crust, salty and rich from the bacon grease, was the most fought-over texture on the tray. Sailors would trade a piece of bacon for an extra square of hash browns. On December 7th, the Nevada's galley had 150 pounds of potatoes waiting to be served. Number 18. Grapefruit halves. Here is where the story turns. Hawaii produced almost no grapefruit in 1941, but Navy supply ships brought them in by the crate from California, chilled in the ship's refrigerated holds. On Sunday mornings, a galley striker would stand for an hour with a serrated grapefruit knife, sectioning the halves so sailors could scoop out the segments with a spoon. Each half was topped with a teaspoon of brown sugar, and sometimes, if the cook was feeling generous, a single maraschino cherry pressed into the center. The cherries came in glass jars from Michigan and were considered a luxury. For most enlisted men, a grapefruit half with a cherry was the fanciest thing they ate all week. The cherries ran out fast after December 7th. Imports from the mainland were rerouted to fighting ships, and most sailors would never see a maraschino again until 1946. Number 17. Fina. First pattern break. Sailors did not call it fina, they called it mud. That hot cereal made from ground wheat and cooked in milk until it turned into a thick steaming paste was served in heavy white bowls with a pea of butter melting on top and a generous pour of brown sugar or molasses. Cream of wheat, the box civilian version, sold for about 14 cents a box at the post exchange, but the Navy bought the bulk version shipped in 50-pound sacks. Here's the wild part. Fina was secretly the most important breakfast item in the entire Navy. Nutritionists at the Bureau of Medicine and Surgery calculated that a bowl of fortified Fina provided almost half a sailor's daily iron and B vitamins. The Navy put it on every Sunday menu to boost morale and keep men healthy on long deployments. The nickname Mud followed sailors into civilian life. Their grandchildren never knew where it came from. Number 16. Stewed prunes. Every sailor's breakfast came with a small dish of stewed prunes, and every sailor complained about them. The Navy Cook Manual of 1940 required prunes to appear on the menu at least 3 times a week. The reason was plain and unmentioned at the table. Sailors ate a diet high in bread, cheese, and meat with almost no fresh vegetables, and the prunes were there to keep them regular. The galleys prepared them in giant kettles simmered overnight with water, a cinnamon stick, and a little sugar. Served warm in a juice-bowled ramekin, they were dark purple, wrinkled, and sweet. Most men pushed them aside. The older sailors, the chiefs, and the cooks ate them without a word, knowing exactly what they did. After the attack, when ships stayed at sea for weeks, the men who had learned to eat their prunes thanked the cooks silently. Number 15. Oatmeal. For sailors who did not want fina, there was oatmeal. Rolled oats were cooked thick in a mix of water and canned milk, seasoned with a pinch of salt, and served with brown sugar, raisins, and a pat of butter. The Quaker Oats Company held a major contract with the Navy in 1941, and the cylindrical blue canisters stacked up in every galley pantry. A cook would measure out 5 pounds of oats and 15 pounds of water into a steam kettle the night before, and set the burner on low so the oatmeal would slowly steep overnight. By morning, it was creamy, thick, and ready to be scooped into bowls. Oatmeal was the cheap man's breakfast, costing less than a cent per serving. But on a cold Sunday morning, aboard a battleship with the harbor breeze coming through the mess deck hatches, a hot bowl of oatmeal with brown sugar felt like home. Number 14. Apple butter. The Navy bought apple butter in gallon tins from small producers in Virginia and Pennsylvania, and it appeared on every breakfast table on Sunday. Dark brown, almost black, spicy with clove and cinnamon, thick enough to spread on toast with a butter knife. Sailors from the South smeared it on biscuits. Sailors from the Midwest spooned it into their oatmeal. Sailors from the Northeast ate it straight off the spoon when no one was looking. A gallon tin cost the Navy about 40 cents and could top toast for 300 men. Apple butter was one of the small pleasures that made Sunday breakfast feel special. It reminded men of their mothers' kitchens, of fall back home, of orchards in Ohio or Tennessee or upstate New York. After December 7th, sugar rationing would shrink apple butter production dramatically, and most mess decks saw less and less of it through the war. Number 13. Cinnamon sweet rolls. The night baker aboard a battleship was the most important man nobody talked about. While the rest of the crew slept, he mixed enormous batches of sweet dough, rolled it flat, brushed it with butter, sprinkled it with cinnamon and brown sugar, rolled it into logs, cut it into spirals, and baked it overnight. By Revy, the mess deck smelled like a bakery in small-town America. Each sailor got 1 roll, sometimes 2, topped with a thin white glaze made from powdered sugar and canned milk. Ferrules were pulled apart layer by layer, the soft, doughy centers saved for last. The Arizona's baker that morning was a young second-class petty officer who had 1531 been up since midnight preparing hundreds of them. His rolls never got served. When the magazine exploded at 806, the bakery went with it. If you want a full collection, I made a cookbook with 100 simple meals inspired by kitchens like these. Link below. Number 12. Canned peaches. Dole and Libby's both held Navy contracts in 1941, and canned peach halves in heavy syrup appeared on Sunday breakfast menus across the entire Pacific Fleet, served in a small glass dish with a little of the syrup poured over, sometimes with a dollop of whipped canned milk on top. They were considered the dessert of breakfast. The peaches came from California orchards, picked in August and September, peeled and pitted in enormous Sacramento canneries, then shipped in number 10 cans that held almost 7 pounds each. A single can fed 15 men. On December 7th, galley storerooms across Pearl Harbor contained thousands of cans of peaches stacked floor to ceiling. Many of those cans went down with their ships and now sit at the bottom of the harbor. Still sealed, the 1651 peaches inside, perfectly preserved in syrup, a quiet underwater memorial to breakfasts that were never finished. Number 11. Toast. The humblest item on every breakfast tray, and the one that took the most work. A Navy mess galley produced between 800 and 1,200 slices of toast every Sunday morning. Cooks used commercial for sliced toasters lined up along a stainless counter, and a striker would stand there for 90 minutes, feeding slices in and pulling them out, stacking them in warming pans. The bread was white, sliced thick, baked fresh in the ship's bakery the night before. Each piece received a pat of butter melted across it. Toast was the vehicle for everything else. SOS went on toast. Apple butter went on toast. Jam went on toast. Scrambled eggs were piled on toast. A ship without toast was a ship with a mutiny brewing. The toasters on the Oklahoma were still warm and full of bread when the ship capsized at 8:32 in the morning. Number 10. Corned beef hash. Second pattern break. Here is a dish nobody expected to find on a Navy breakfast menu. And yet there it was every Sunday. Cans of corned beef imported from Argentina and Uruguay were mashed together with diced boiled potatoes, minced onion, and a splash of Worcestershire sauce. The mixture was pressed onto a hot griddle and fried until the bottom formed a dark crusty shell. It was flipped once, sometimes topped with a poached egg and served with a squirt of ketchup. The sailors who loved it fiercely. The ones who hated it thought it tasted like dog food. The Navy had been stockpiling canned corned beef for almost 2 years in case of war. And on December 7, 1941, Pearl Harbor's warehouses held over 100,000 pounds of it. Within a week, that corned beef would be feeding sailors fighting halfway across the Pacific. Number 9. Ham steak. Sunday morning on a battleship meant fried ham, cut thick, scored along the fatty edge so it would not curl, and seared on the flat top until the edges caramelized. The Navy bought ham from Virginia and North Carolina packers, cured and smoked with hickory, shipped in enormous wheels wrapped in cheesecloth. Each steak was about half an inch thick and served